Manchester United faithful, let's kick off. Football fans, after last week's chaotic Manchester Derby thriller, it's time to unpack every goal, tactic, and what it means for the Premier League title race. Welcome to the Madras United podcast, your new home for all things Red Devils. I'm Sanjay, your host, and joining me today is my co host, Desmond. We've been friends for the last 2 decades, college mates who started our professional careers at the same organization, and now it's time for us to try something new. Manchester United has always been our favorite club, our passion, and the topic of discussion every single week. That's why it feels logical to bring this offline discussion more mainstream through this podcast, centered primarily on United. We've been looking forward to this for a long time, Desmond, right? Talking about it now, what's the one United memory that still gives you chills?
Hey, Sanjay. Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me on this podcast. Talk about United memories. There's definitely a lot. I would definitely start off with how I became a Manchester United fan in the first place. It so happened back in the 90s, especially during the 1998 World Cup. That's when I got introduced to football first and
Okay.
then started watching club football altogether. Eventually, one fine day, my friend and I, we were tuning into satellite television, trying to catch sports on ESPN and Star Sports, and that's when we came across the Leeds and Manchester United game. I chose United at that point in time because I like the color red, fortunately, and ended up supporting United for more than 2 decades. But imagine what if Liverpool or Arsenal were playing that day. They're also red. I could have been a Liverpool fan, not an Arsenal fan. You never know. But luckily for me, it was Manchester United, and here I am today after a couple of decades sitting with you talking about our favorite memories of the greatest club in the world. There's lots of memories to talk about, especially with Manchester United during their successful years. Not so great right now in the last decade, but somewhere between the 2000s to up until 2010 has been one of the greatest periods of this club. If I have to pick one memory, I would definitely call out the United versus Barcelona semi-final that was played at Old Trafford in 2008,
Okay.
the Champions League match I have ever seen. We had a front two of Ronaldo and Tevez. Unfortunately, we did not play that game. I think he was out injured, if I'm not wrong. But we had Ronaldo and Tevez up front. We had Michael Carrick and Scholes dominating midfield, and you had wingers in Nani and Jisung Park. And then in
Right.
defense, Chris Brown and Rio Ferdinand. And then you had Patrice Evra in left back, and then you had Nick Sylvester as well. So this was a great lineup that came up against the famous Barcelona, an upcoming Barcelona team that was going to dominate Champions League football and football in general in Europe. Of course, Messi in that lineup, you knew during that time that he was going to become one of the best players in the world. He was only 20 at that point in time. Um, the match at Old Trafford was definitely electrifying. We started off, I think, by scoring the goal in 14th minute. And that was a goal from Paul Scholes, that screamer from long range. Over the ball off Gianluca Zambrota in defense and coming to Scholes' feet. He kind of made this first touch with his left foot, looked at the goal, and then flicked it right into the top corner of the net. I still remember the ball flying into the net past Victor Valdez, which Scholes went on to admit later during one of his interviews, saying that he actually mistimed it. He actually, mishit the ball and it eventually went in,
Wow.
right? Imagine if he had middle, it could be much better. But yeah, so that happen and create magical moments, right? One of those are one of those memories that kind of stick with me when I think of Manchester United, and one of those successful periods that we had during the 2000s. As a fan, it is actually disappointing right now to see United go through this huge slump,
Mhm.
right from since Alex left in 2013 up until when was sacked. Unfortunately, I see a promising start to Carrick's stint as manager and the couple of matches that we've watched with City and Arsenal and getting some good victories. But yeah, definitely looking forward to getting out of this bad slump to the old United ways, back to victorious seasons, back to getting into Champions League football and being happy fans overall.
Great. Thank you for that memory. I clearly remember that Paul Scholes goal. That's what you call a top bin, right up there.
Exactly.
But if that's your favorite, last week's Manchester Derby 2-0 statement win has to rank high. Mbeumo screamer from 25 yards, Dorgu slotting home the sealer on the break, and Martinez marshalling the back line. Haaland completely nullified. City dominated possession at 67% but couldn't land a shot on target. Carrick's game plan was textbook: sit deep, spring the trap, lethal on the counter. Desmond, let's break it down. Can we start with Martinez's defensive masterclass? Licha is only 5'9", and the player he's defending is Haaland, who stands at 6'4". And boy, did he pocket him.
Oh, definitely, Sanjay. One of the standout performances by Lisandro Martinez on that day for the Manchester Derby. There was a bit of a controversy that happened prior to the game where Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt made those comments about his height and how Haaland was going to pocket him, run away with him. There's a separate topic for discussion overall. But he definitely did dominate the defense that day. So much so that Haaland was being substituted off in the second half. He was nowhere to be seen. Maybe a couple of attempts on goal is what was that stood out. Apart from that, he was nowhere to be seen on the pitch. So it goes to show the amount of effort that Martinez actually put in to try and shut down Haaland completely, both from a defensive perspective and also from duels that he won, right? Both aerial and ground duels. More of ground duels, to be honest, because City is a team that plays along the ground, try and make those passes through the lines, and then end up scoring goals. They're not more of a long ball kind of a team like regular Premier League teams, right? But I think both the aerial duels and the ground duels, Martinez did actually a great performance against Haaland. I was actually very keen to see how he would fare shoulder to shoulder with Haaland as well when they're making those runs behind the defense. I think he did really good and put in a defensive masterclass like you called out. Amazing performance. So there was this speculation earlier that Carrick would not play Lisandro Martinez in defense. He would try and pair in someone else. Having Harry Maguire and Martinez together, there's a bit of a height difference there, and you needed people who can defend the box during corners. But I think he shut all the haters down, Martinez. And he's been doing that right from day one, hasn't he? Especially carried criticism of Martinez when he came into the Premier League from Ajax. When Eric Ten Hag brought him in, the first talk of the town was this guy's height. And so much of criticism came his way, and he's definitely proved all his, skeptics wrong, his haters wrong. And he's been talking on the pitch every time he started a game. So definitely a great performance from Martinez, not just this game, but he'll want to become a United legend if he continues. Yeah.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more on what you said about Licha. But Desmond, that win also shows what Mbeumo and Amad bring back from uh, AFCON. Fresh legs from international duty and straight into Carrick's system. What do you think these two give United in the long term, right? In terms of counter threat, in terms of work rate, in terms of big game mentality? Walk us through their fit into this team.
Okay. One of the greatest advantages right in time for the Manchester Derby was having both Brian Mbeumo and Amad back in the lineup, right? One of the standout performers. I think this season Mbeumo has been the best signing so far, Premier League proven, and he definitely was a great addition to the squad. Characters that he brings to this particular squad and to Manchester United, that he's got this amazing finishing. He's got the physique to match the physicality of the Premier League. He's got the pace. He's got the tactical threat, etc. And he's, like I said, he's already Premier League proven, so he would fit into this United side very well. Uh, his performance was definitely standout versus City. I would put Diallo together along with him, but
Mhm.
the opening goal that happened in the 64th minute when he scored the first goal of the match. So we had this rapid breakaway of the United counter where it was led by Bruno Fernandes. Mbeumo received a precise pass and then he coolly slotted the ball past Donnarumma in the bottom corner. Amazing goal. You clearly showed his calm and composure on, in that counter attack. You should not be panicking at that point in time to take the ball into your path and then score that goal with great composure. Was definitely great performance. I think he's part of this dynamic front line in that game, constantly drifting between left wing and the central positions, right? So
Mhm.
some of the pundits talked about this precisely, where the United front line was a bit fluid, where you had Brian Mbeumo dropping into pockets within the midfield to try and pick the ball and then run into defenders. So that was one of, like a tactical adjustment that was done by Carrick, which worked, great wonders for us, especially with the dynamic nature of Mbeumo's football that helped us score that goal and break on the counter to try and catch City off guard. So he's definitely been one of the bright sparks in our offensive line, at least this season, and we see United improving definitely in this 4-2-3-1 formation that Carrick is currently playing. Talking about Mbeumo, then you definitely cannot stop talking about Amad Diallo as well. What a player! He's definitely been underrated. Wasn't used as much in the very beginning when he got signed into United. He was sent out on loan to Atlanta. In Italy, he was sent out on loan to Sunderland. Came back. I think his season at Sunderland gave him a lot of experience in terms of the Premier League and also the Championship. At that point in time, Sunderland were in the Championship, now back in the Premier League. But that gave him the experience in English football and helped him very well. So to start with his performance, especially in that particular game against Man City, created hub along with Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes especially. And most of the time, he was this outlet that allowed United to transition from defense to attack. If you noted this game and even games prior to this, I even remember a Liverpool game. I think it was the FA Cup, one of the FA Cup matches that we won a couple of seasons ago, where he would break from a defensive position and pass the ball on to the defense and then run along to try and score the goal at the end. That's been one of his great traits. That actually helped us hammer City on the counter in that particular game in the recent Manchester derby.
Yeah.
Right. So in the first half, we had this sort of goal from Ahmad. He found back of the net after going around, but it was a marginal offside. But still, a great performance by him, and definitely key for us, taking City apart and their defense apart specifically. If you look at his positioning for that second goal, he kind of stretched City's defense. Also, not the second goal, sorry, the first goal. He kind of stretched City's defense by moving on to the right. So which kind
Mhm.
of it took one defender off the picture, and that kind of allowed Bruno and Mbeumo to and combine to go that first goal. So that was also a very good performance by Ahmad. So yeah, like you said, both of them great additions. Really back in time, after the AFCON and going to be vital for the rest of the season for United.
Now, very interesting what you said about Ahmad, right? And while you were mentioning that, I remembered two goals. I think you kindly touched upon it. One was the goal against Liverpool in the FA Cup, again in extra time, where we
Yeah,
beat them. That was again on the break, first time shot that he took from Garnacho's assist. And then the other was again a City derby away at Etihad, stoppage time winner. I think that he
yes,
scored. Again,
yeah,
brilliant. It's only his pace, his vision, his agility that can bring these goals, right? It's not something that anyone can do. He's small, he's tiny, but the pace that he brings and the impact that he has on the ground is amazing.
yeah, definitely.
Right. Great. And I know we spoke about Mbumo's goal, and you also slightly touched upon it, right, in terms of Bruno's brilliance over there. That was absolute uh, pure vision. And Thierry Henry kind of broke it down on one of the videos. He said Bruno doesn't play, he thinks. So uh, he controlled the tempo the entire game. He created multiple chances. What do you think he brings to this team as a captain? And if you can elaborate more on that goal, if you can just break it down. to say why is it so important for him to play in that role?
Yeah, definitely. Bruno has always been the standout performer, at least in the last 4 seasons, right? Right from the time he came into the club. Of course, not on the list of the number of goals right now, but the contribution that he brings into the team with his creative play. That's what is most important. And also being one of our captains. He definitely is one of the standout performers, or was one of the standout performers from that game against City. We had Gary Neville, who precisely described Bruno's performance as being Cantona-esque, that he's been released from a deeper midfield position from the previous management, or he was being used as a deeper playmaker rather than being a creative midfielder up front, which is the number 10 position, which suits him the best, right?
Mhm.
So I think he looked a much, much better player being up front and taking part in the attack during those counters. That was key. And like you rightly said, Thierry Henry described this broke down this goal, the first goal that led to Brian Mbeumo's you know attack and netting the ball into the top right, into the bottom right corner. So after the break, from a defensive position, Harry Maguire hits the ball back into midfield. Bruno Fernandes takes the ball into midfield, runs along with it. He spots Mbeumo on the left, he spots Amad on the right, and you have two defenders from City tracking back. So he did this one particular thing that stood out, which Thierry Henry described perfectly in his breakdown, in his review. So Bruno thinks about football is definitely the perfect way to describe his performance rather than him playing football. But that moment, justifies why we need him as this creative midfielder, as this captain in the team. So he runs into the defense and he sees this defender tracking back and he makes this one slight move to the right and then to the left to try and put the defender off guard, and then he slides the ball into Mbeumo's path. He also saw Amar on the right, but he waited until the last minute to not pass it on to him. The natural instinct would obviously have been to pass it to Amar because he was slightly wider and he could have scored the goal from the right side. But you never know what could have happened. But I think he thought differently, put the ball into Mbeumo's path, up the defender off guard, and then you know what happened after that. The ball went into the net, and we were celebrating the first goal. We kind of broke the deadlock. So this definitely was an outstanding performance from Bruno. Has always been United's key performer, United's outstanding performer in the last few years. I think Carrick has kind of unlocked his potential, which I thought Ole Gunnar Solskjaer used very well when he was with United. I think he was the one who came in and gave him that freedom to play. So I think Carrick has brought the best out of Fernandes, and I definitely see Fernandes going on to stay with United and play a lot more seasons and become one of the United legends.
Lovely. So you said there were two options, right? He could have gone to Ahmad on the right or to Mbeumo on the left. The third option was for him to take the shot himself.
Yeah.
And I believe if it had been last season, he would have done that. But now Mbeumo or Ahmad have given him that confidence that they would be able to finish it. So that's why he went for Mbeumo. I think we've spoken extensively about the first goal, but it was the second goal that sealed the deal in that match, right? I wanted to quickly touch base on two players. One is Cunha. Cunha comes on, replaces Mbeumo. There's a slight change in the pace that he brings. When I say pace, he is fast, but in terms of holding up play, which he's really good at, especially towards the end of the game. And then
Yeah.
Dorgu, right? Brilliant pass, amazing finish. You wouldn't expect Dorgu to play there. I don't think I've ever seen him play in that position or end up in that position in the last season or so. But out of the blue, he just comes, overpowers the defender, gets ahead, and a brilliant finish, especially against Donnarumma, who has done really well for City this season. Walk us through that goal.
Yeah, definitely. I think bringing on Cunha was a great move, and we had this great player on the bench who was waiting to come on. I think what City would not have expected is for Dorgu to play up front on the wing
Mhm.
rather than being a wing back, right? I think that kind of caught them off guard, and they weren't prepared for his game. So I think that's what helped us as a team and helped Dorgu score that goal as well. Brilliant from Cunha to try and hold the ball for a split second and then bomb the flank on the right hand side to try and cross the ball into the path of the goal. I think the City defender who was running in to try and defend the box wasn't looking at Dorgu,
Mm, mm.
who's to the right of
He
him,
was
running
inside it.
blindsided, coming in from behind. And I think that's what got the advantage. And no one would have expected a defender to run in and score that goal, right? To try and mark people in the box is difficult when a defender comes in. So I think that was the right moment, and Dorgu, used that opportunity to run right into the middle, because most times you would have these wingers and fullbacks at the far end of the pitch, but here he was right in the middle to try and meet the ball when the cross came in. So brilliant move. Cunha crossed the ball, came in unmarked. Dorgu scored that goal and gave us that 2-goal lead. What a performance! And I didn't expect that at all from Dorgu. Yeah.
Yeah, not just from Dogo. I don't think we were expecting that performance from anyone at United. Right after Amorim is sacked, you have Carrick coming in, Fletcher managing a couple of games in the interim, getting us a couple of draws. Then Carrick comes in. The first game that he has to manage is against City at home. The result could have been anything, right? It could have been a drubbing, it could have been a draw, we could have probably fought till the end, but no one was expecting such a convincing performance. And it looks like this team it's a totally different team, and not the team that we've been seeing so far this season. And talking on that, what do you think is in store for the rest of the season? Carrick has come in, the players seem to be playing differently. They've got a different freedom that I can see, right? Of course, there's a change in formation from what Amram used to do. But what can we expect from this team? Is this going to be just one good performance? Do we see that we are contenders for the top four finish for this season?
See, Sanjay, I'll be very realistic here. Top four contenders, not really. I'm not keeping my hopes very high, but I'm looking for a top six finish. Definitely an optimist, but yeah, I would like to be realistic as well. So,
But
top six.
if I have to interrupt you there, we were sixth on the table when Amarim was sacked.
Yeah,
And one of the reasons mentioned by the management was that whoever is coming in new would probably give us a better finish at the table, right? So are we still looking at a top six finish? Then what difference is Carrick bringing in?
I'll tell you why. So we've definitely changed the style of play from a 3-4-3 to a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2 in transition. And
Hmm.
we've been, especially with the game that just got concluded, we caught them on the counter. We sat back, defended on the counter, with pace up front, and we scored those goals. We caught people off guard, which is definitely promising. But you also need to look at the other teams who have a similar style of play, right? There are going to be games where United will have more of possession, and it's how we perform with the ball and without the ball as well. We've seen that with City. Off the ball, we sit back, defend, and break on the counter. But when you have games where teams give you the possession, said, "Go ahead, you keep the ball, you try and break us down and score those goals. What are
Mm.
we going to do then?" Right? So I think the next few games against Fulham, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, all of these games will be vital. On paper, easy games, but I think from what we've seen in the past, we've faltered against teams who are lower in the league as well. So I'm not definitely keeping my hopes very high, but what I'm excited about is the way we are playing right now, the style of football, the attacking play, even the creative side of things from Bruno is brilliant. So I would definitely see United performing really well. But if you ask me if a top four finish is on the cards, I'm not sure. But top six is something that we can aim for realistically. If we get a top six finish, we could compete in the Europa League. I know, going by United standards and the amount of success that we've seen in the past, not playing Champions League is like this great sin, but you have to think of reality. There's this transition period that we are in right now, and I know we've been in transition for at least the last 10 years. That's what we've been talking about. But if we have to get out of this phase, and if our performance has to see an upward trajectory, then this is what we need to look at, right? Address one game at a time. One thing that we have as an advantage is that we don't have European football this season. We don't have a Carabao Cup or the FA Cup to play for. It's only the Premier League, so you would expect United to perform really well, to use the midweek to try and rejuvenate, relax, train, perform really well on weekends when it comes to Premier League. Whereas you have the other teams who are playing other the leagues too. Not the leagues. When I say leagues, I'm talking about European football in terms of Champions League, in terms of Europa League. You have FA Cup and Carabao Cup too. So I think that's one advantage that we have. Definitely looks promising. We can
Mhm.
definitely. I mean, if we try really hard and we take one game at a time, play the same way we are doing right now without dropping the ball. I think we can finish in top four, but realistically, the target would be top six. So that's my take on what we have in store for the rest of the season. Maybe you have a different opinion, but yeah, let's hear it from you too, Sanjay.
I think a top four is what we should aim for. A top six, like I mentioned, if you're confident in terms of where you want to be and that is why you're making a change, then if you don't achieve that, then that defeats the purpose of having a change during the middle of the season, right? Especially when you started believing, at least as a fan, I started believing that Amarim's structure and style of play was working, right? And
Yeah,
I know there's too much talk in terms of his style of play and what that does. But what he's also done is, I would say he's done a cleanup activity of the team, right? We are talking about all these players that we've mentioned during this podcast, are all players who've come in after we were able to let go of players who were not right for this United team.
yeah,
Individually, they are great players. And that's why Rashford, for example, has gone to Barcelona, Garnacho has gone to Chelsea. There are big clubs waiting to pick up these players. So, no question in terms of their ability, in terms of their talent. But when it comes to the United style of play, the United DNA, the character that they show, we really had to let go of some people. And Amarim did a wonderful job. Ties back to what Ralph Ragnick said a few seasons ago, that there's a open heart surgery that's needed. We kind of didn't understand at that time what he meant, but what he meant was we really have to rip apart this team, throw out all the people who are not needed and build a new team, right? No matter what that player's name is, what credentials they carry. And that's what Amarim did. And I think we will reap the benefits in the coming days. And at some point, we'll have to pause and thank him wherever he is, because what United are going to achieve this season and in the coming future, we owe a lot to Amarim. And top four is what I'm expecting. I strongly believe that this is not just one game where we put in that performance. I'm expecting this team to do well, do better than what we've done in the first half of the season.
yeah, definitely spot on with that analysis as well, Sanjay. Especially on Ruben Amorim and what he's done for us. Although he's left, although his formation would not have suited United way, like the pundits call it. He's done an amazing job by doing a massive clear out, especially
Yeah,
Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Anthony, Alejandro Garnacho, and then apparently Terrell Malacia as well was part of that gang.
yeah,
So I think
yeah.
we've got rid of most of the rotten apples from the basket. I think massive clear out. No matter how your game is, you could be a great player, you could be the one of the best in the world, but if you don't fit the DNA, if you don't have the character, if you don't put your head down, if you're not as humble, then you should definitely be thrown out, right? So Alex Ferguson showed that with Roy Keane.
Yeah,
Roy
yeah.
Keane was at his peak, he was the best captain that we could have ever had. One of the most iconic players at United. One fine day, after a match, he went ahead, spoke to MOTV, and gave this interview where he kind of bashed United players, saying that they were at fault. Sir Alex Ferguson stepped in immediately. He stopped that footage from going out into the media, and he called Roy Keane for a meeting. They had a bit of a go at each other, and after that, he called the players together and said, Roy will not be playing for United going forward. So it was that brutal. If it could happen to a captain like Roy Keane, who was vital for United as a side at that point in time in the 2000s, I think no one else can also be spared, right? Rashford could be one of the best wingers in the world. It doesn't make any sense if you don't have the right character to play for United. And I would definitely credit Ruben Amorim for that. He clinically dismissed all of these players with the help of the board, definitely. To get rid of all of them, at least Rashford is on loan right now at Barcelona. He might come back. Fortunately for Jadon Sancho, his contract is expiring come end of the season, so we'll let go of him as a free agent. But think of all the massive clear up in terms of the wages as well, right? He's has helped United financially too. You had all these players who were sitting at very high wage packets
Right.
within the United, United team that we've got today. And speaking of finances, we're a club that's in massive debt. We're going through a massive makeover in terms of management, in terms of ownership. You have Ineos trying to cut down costs every nook and corner within the club, even cutting down meals for the staff at the club. So you can imagine the amount of focus there is on finance, on numbers, on money as well, right? So all these players moving out of the club has helped us release some of the finances that we've got locked in those players' wages. So all credit to Ruben Amorim. He's become the bad cop, I would say, but he's done us a massive, massive favor in setting up the club in where we are right now. We've got the players with the right mindset, I believe, with the right manager, and with everything falling into place, I think we'll go on to become a consistent team, if not the best.
Awesome. On that note, Desmond, what an episode one. Hearing your favorite United memory at the start and then seeing how it shapes the way you look at this team today, that's exactly the kind of conversation we wanted to capture. Not just reacting to results, but connecting the United way we grew up with to the United we are watching now here on the Madras United podcast. Listeners, you're now part of that conversation. Here's what you can look forward to weekly: match breakdowns like last weekend's Derby Masterclass, and no holds barred United talk from two fans who've lived it all. We need your support to grow this. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Share with fellow Reds in your WhatsApp groups and comment your favorite United memory below. We'll shout out the best ones. Desmond, pleasure as always. And United faithful, glory, glory, Man United. See you next week.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.